Chair recognizes the gentlewoman from Indiana.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I yield myself such time as I may consume. I have a very simple amendment. Actually, what it does is just says, if Congress doesn't authorize specifically funds for UN, which should be part of our process, this agency shouldn't be funded and projects that UN is doing. I probably could defund the whole UN, but I'll take a much smaller steps and say Congress needs to do its job. If it's not authorized, that's a process that Congress should follow, that shouldn't be funded. And I know that that's not a problem of Appropriations Committee. Authorization Committee didn't do its job, but if they didn't do a job, then they should start doing the job. So I think the process is broken, and we need to start dealing with corrupt agencies as UN, and I reserve.
The gentlewoman yields. For what purpose? Oh, the gentlewoman reserves. For what purpose does the gentlewoman from New York seek recognition?
Madam Chair, I claim the time in opposition.
The gentlewoman is recognized.
I rise in strong opposition to this amendment. The bill, as it stands, already cuts 83% of the contributions to international organizations' account compared to fiscal year 24 and excludes funding for our treaty obligations as well as the majority of UN organizations that we traditionally fund. We have watched as the PRC challenges the U.S. at the UN and other multilateral institutions, working to insert their values of authoritarianism and disrespect for human rights. By cutting off funding to the UN and its agencies, this bill leaves a void for our adversaries to fill. Let me give you one example of the devastating effect of this amendment. In 2023, the U.S. was the largest contributor to UNICEF's core resources. It's this consistent funding that has enabled UNICEF and partners to reduce under 5 childhood mortality by more than half since the year 2000, and more children are surviving today than ever before. This support could end. The UN is not perfect. No large bureaucracy is. But our ability to improve its operations, make sure its stances reflect our values, and have the UN serve its mission for peace hinges on the U.S. being an active participating member of that organization. I fully support the authorization of these entities, but we all know that will not happen overnight. While we work towards that goal, we cannot cut off participation and support. I urge my colleagues to oppose this amendment. I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentlewoman reserves. The gentlewoman from Indiana was recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I think my colleague is not representing the amendment very correct. This amendment not defund full UN, which we probably should, considering what's happening. It just defines programs that we did not explicitly authorize, and Congress should be doing its job. But let's talk about UNICEF. UNICEF not long ago admitted shortcomings in its humanitarian support to children who alleged that they were raped and sexually abused by peacekeepers in Central African Republic. This is the same UN agency that when UN employees were alleged participating in Hamas attack. Where just recently, one of the U.S. agencies, their staff whistleblower alleged large sums are being lost to corruption in Iraq as donors fail to track spending on 1.5 billion aid projects were served. Roughly $500 million funded by taxpayers' fund for the United States. And the employees actually saying it's not just this culture is fueled and culture of bribery and corruption is fueled by UN. It's also this culture and funds being spent on large UN overheads and really don't even get to the people. And I've been on the ground a lot, and I'll be honest with you, our allies around the world are laughing that we're giving money to corrupt organizations that are controlled by Russia and China and work most of the time against American interests and doesn't help really the people. I've been in war zones, including like in Ukraine, including the Middle East, in Africa. You haven't seen them. You come them in fancy hotels with fancy cars, where the executive showed up for picture op with congressional delegations, and people are suffering and dying, and American consumers and Americans are paying large money and borrowed debt of our grandchildren to make some of the very wealthy and corrupt. I think this is embarrassing for us. The Congress, we don't take our job seriously, start looking at these agencies and looking at the corruption within these agencies. And I think this is something that we have to take way more seriously, and we should not have a blank checks to corrupt organizations like UN. And we need to do our job. So I truly believe we should really send the message that Americans are not stupid, we're not going to be taken advantage of, and Congress is not stupid. We actually will start looking at these programs, authorizing them, and see what's really happening on the ground if we really want to achieve results, and our adversaries are not going to be laughing at us and our allies. I'll be honest with you, most of our allies saying we are not going to be giving money to these corrupt organizations like UN. And I think Congress needs to take seriously, and I reserve.
And I do want to remind members to address their remarks to the chair. The gentlewoman from New York.
As mentioned before, our participation is in the United States' interest. I oppose this amendment. I yield back.
The gentlewoman yields back. The gentlewoman from Indiana is recognized.
I think, Madam Speaker, I think in our national interest is to make sure that taxpayers' funds are really achieving goals in our best interest. And unfortunately, organizations like UN being corrupt and actually sabotage and diminish and work against our national interests around the world and make a lot of wealthy people who are not our friends very wealthy. And we have now the serious situation in our country and serious debt and inflation that is becoming national security issues. And I urge my colleagues to become stronger and start challenging the corruption and not to be afraid to challenge the status quo. It's the right thing to do. That's why people elect us here. And I urge my colleagues to support this amendment. Thank you, and I yield back.